For more on the developments in Ukraine, let's talk to our Europe correspondent Mary Gearan in London. Mary, good morning. What have been the latest developments?
Good morning, Virginia. Well, as you say, it's a pretty fast developing situation here. You've got the Ukrainian Prime Minister saying that Russia has effectively declared war, and he's put all of his military on high alert in full battle readiness. He's called up his reserves, and although he says he doesn't want to go to war, and the interim president has said they want to avoid that, he's calling on international forces to try and help them in their situation because things are rapidly going out of control. In Crimea, 3 of the military bases are now surrounded by Russian troops. You even have the head of the Navy there, who was appointed yesterday by Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, switching allegiances to the Crimean government there, which is not recognised by Kiev. So today, also in Brussels, you've had a NATO meeting, an emergency meeting. We're still waiting for the outcome of that. But before he went in, the Secretary-General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, put his opinion forward that Russia really needs to de-escalate the situation. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
What Russia is doing now in Ukraine violates the principles of the United Nations Charter. It threatens peace and security in Europe. Russia must stop its military activities and its threats.
So obviously some strong words there from Anders Fogh Rasmussen, and you also were alluding to those very strong statements from John Kerry, the US Secretary of State. Very strong language talking about potentially Russia being thrown out of the G8. Interestingly, William Hague, the British Foreign Secretary, flew to Kiev today, and before he did, he wouldn't go so far. He was talking very much about trying to calm the situation down, that everyone needs to make sure that there's perhaps direct or at the very least indirect dialogue between Ukraine and Russia, and that's what he'll be working towards. Having said that, this afternoon the British Prime Minister has tweeted that he doesn't think it's appropriate for any of his ministers to go, for instance, to the Paralympics at Sochi. And also William Hague had some things to say about joining France and US in their indications that they will pull out of this week's preparatory meetings ahead of the G8 in Russia later this year. Let's have a listen to what he said.
At the same time, we have to recognise the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine has been violated, and this cannot be the way to conduct international affairs. And so in addition to calling yesterday's emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, the United Kingdom will join other G8 countries this week in suspending our cooperation under the G8, which Russia chairs this year.
William Hague there. Mary, interestingly, those discussions continue between Russia and Germany, and they're saying that they're still going to keep talking, seeking what they call normalisation of the Ukraine situation between Vladimir Putin and Angela Merkel. But curiously, or not so much curiously, but I guess troublingly, as part of those discussions, Vladimir Putin is still saying that all the measures taken by Russia have been completely appropriate, is the phraseology emerging from the Kremlin. So that doesn't give us much comfort, does it?
No, that's right. In fact, what the observers are saying, that this is classic Russian tactics, if you like, to go at it both ways, to seem like they're obviously working through in a statesmanlike manner and to be important diplomatically. On the other hand, you have potentially, according to the West, according to NATO, potential breaches of international law. So everyone waits to see what happens from Moscow. There's been no real comment from Moscow in relation to those comments from John Kerry or William Hague or even NATO's meeting. So everyone's waiting as well to see what they have to say in response to today.
So what happens now? We just keep going with these talks?
That's right. And also what happens is that we're waiting to see what happens in Crimea. You had Ukrainian troops and Russian troops face to face, toe to toe, as it were, through some metal, where the Russians were essentially asking the Ukrainian troops, as in the army base there, to surrender their territory. Now, after a brief discussion, the Russians decided no, they wouldn't enter the base today. What happens tomorrow? So these are the sort of things that are going to perhaps force the hand of the diplomats who are running around the world trying to solve this situation.
And Mary, just finally, if it ever came down to it, there'd be no combat or no sort of real test for the Russian military might against the Ukraine.
That's right. In fact, what many are saying is that the mobilisation of troops there is just as much as anything to show that they have awesome power. And troubling when many people consider that the West, and even despite John Kerry's response, even the US cannot afford to make a military response. So the West's hands may be tied in that way. And as you say, that force is growing by the day, and it'll be and the Kiev government is saying that it needs help.